Great, and let's just roll with it. I think this is good. Perfect.
Good, good.
So,
Let's see.
so we were talking about a movie with who was it in the movie that we were talking?
Yeah,
where we left off.
Yes, Roman Polanski.
That's right.
Yeah,
Where
the
he's the
Polish
actor.
director who
Yeah.
has been banned from America for a dalliance or rape of a 13-year-old girl, is having to live in exile in France. But this is, just to give you a little background,
Yeah.
Polanski was, before that happened to him, before he did what he did, and kind of ruined his life, he was a great director, and I guess is still making films.
Yeah.
This particular one that I wanted to bring out was called The Tenant, and it's about Roman himself being a man looking for an apartment in Paris, and he has found a building that looks promising, and he goes in and negotiates with the owner, who's a crusty old guy, and you could tell there's going to be problems. The former tenant of that apartment that he does select finally is a woman who committed suicide from that apartment window, and so it's kind of a red flag for a viewer that this is going to be quite a show. So it's all about the young man Roman in the new building, in the new apartment, with dealing with the people that live in the building, his co-workers, and people that he gets involved with. It's fascinating, and it typifies what I think is a great example of psychological thriller, psychological terror.
The sense of unease, right?
Unease, yes.
And the people are hiding things from you?
Yes, they're hiding things from you, and they're perhaps doing things to you that make no sense. Perhaps they're cruel things, and you can't really figure out why you're the victim of these kinds of nasty things, and you don't see yourself being, you didn't cause them, so why are they happening to you?
Like a sense of victimhood almost?
Yes.
That you have to get to the heart of why this is happening?
Exactly.
Something kind of, I hate to use this word, but almost Kafka-esque
yes,
about it.
Yes,
exactly. You're caught up in something
right.
that seems irrational and unjust.
Yes.
And that you are on the receiving end of something
yes.
insane and cruel.
You're thinking of the trial?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The idea that you've got to make sense of this somehow.
Yes,
to restore a sense of moral clarity to the world again.
Yes. And again, it's happening faster than you can cope. There's so many realizations that are happening that seem so incredibly unrealistic or unfair to you that you wonder why it's going on. Yeah, so that's one phase of the kind of horror movie that I enjoy and Leslie enjoys.
Yeah.
The other end of that spectrum, it would be the physical violence that occurs in a horror movie. And I think a lot of people would rather stay clear of that because it's pretty damn scary. And my feeling is that you're in the safety of your own home and you can yell and scream and know that even though there's some risk in seeing these images, you are relatively safe.
And you have an appetite for those kinds of outsized emotions,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Like to pursue these larger than life
right.
kind of experiences and to experience them by proxy.
Yes, and you learn from them so that perhaps you can build a code of behavior for your life. For example, never go into a dark basement to see what the noise is. This is the kind of thing that happens all the time. You're hearing a noise in your home and you get up from a deep sleep and you go get a flashlight and try to investigate what's going on downstairs in the basement.
God forbid you would turn on an overhead light, right?
Yeah.
Totally off the table.
So that's one thing. Another thing is if you're having people over for dinner and you don't know them well, don't keep your knives in a prominent place. Hide those kitchen knives. Don't make them a feature of the dinner table. They're the little things that you begin to learn.
Common sense, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If there's going to be a vampire around, well, at least try to have some extra garlic so that you can protect yourself. Wear a garland of garlic. Do sensible things.
Should be easy for an Italian. Yeah.
His brother used to enjoy their garden. The other thing is, if you're going to go look for a vampire, they'll be asleep at night, so this is the time to extradite them, so to speak, to extinguish them. And if you do, always have a wooden stake with you. Not the steaks that you eat, but a wooden pole of some kind sharpened so that you're ready to drive it into their heart, which is the way to kill one of these vampires.
So other than learning how to deal with a vampire, would you run into one? Do you think that there is something about when you were talking about your dentist, whose name I forget?
Oh yes.
And learning your
Andrew.
Yeah, and learning the pain tolerance
Right.
from the dentist. Do you think that that's related to the interest in being frightened?
Yes, I think it is. In one character in a horror movie years ago, when he was asked why he appreciated violent encounters, he said, "I want to seize the fear right away and act on it. I don't want the fear to continue to be harbored in my mind. If I'm fearful, I'm going to jump up and act on it right away and work with the fear." And I thought that was really brilliant. I thought it was profound, in fact, because we often we want to shy away from things that make us fearful.
Certainly.
When we think there's a possibility of violence.
Right.
What if we were to take it, like for example, a woman, Asian woman was attacked on Market Street a few weeks ago.
That's right.
By a homeless person, and she fought back. She was hurt, but she fought back, and everybody came to her rescue, and she was a hero.
Right.
At the same time that she was a poor victim, she acted on that fear.
Well, she refused to be a victim.
Yeah, she refused to.
Right.
And that struck me as being so amazing.
Yeah.
For this tiny little older Asian woman who was being perhaps picked upon because of the fact that she was Asian, and people are blaming the Asians for the COVID situation.
Right.
And this is going rampant now, this hatred of Asians, unfounded, and so she was not going to be putting up with any kind of abuse as much as she could.
Yeah.
Her tiny little frame, she fought back.
And we celebrate people like that.
Yeah, we celebrate it. In fact, there was a fund set aside for her, GoFundMe, and it raised a ton of money. Hopefully she'll have access to
I heard about that.
Improve her life, because she was on the street selling foods.
Right, putting herself in danger.
In danger for sure.
Right, just to make a living and to
Exactly.
get by. Right.
So the whole point of this is that perhaps we can learn from the horror movies that we see, whether they're psychologically horrific or physically horrific, to do something to rise up and try to fight those home intruders, or fight the person who's trying to take our wallet or our cell phone, because we're going to be hurt if we don't. So if you're going to be hurt, you might as well at least take someone else out too.
Right, go down swinging, as they say. Yeah. It's an interesting perspective on watching those movies, because what I really hear you saying is that you're confronted with the opportunity to either be brave or to be cowardly.
Right.
And that there are so many situations in life where you will have to make that choice.
Yes.
And that these are ways of sort of inculcating that response to be brave and to recognize that you're afraid, but that you still have to take action.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And in some cases, or in most cases, the perpetrator will rely on the fact that you're going to be squeamish or cowardly or fearful, and seize upon that opportunity. And is very surprised often when he gets a retaliation that he or she is not expecting. So the fighting back, the screaming, running into the street, causing a commotion, will often protect someone from impending violence that can happen. So perhaps getting away from my horror movies, but it's a personal interest.
Yeah.
I enjoy those films. I've got quite a collection. I've got my wife watching them to some degree.
And you were also saying, when we talked about your hobbies in a summary context that it's your opinion that the psychological dimension has, let's say, has waned in recent years. That horror movies seem to be more just gruesome and less cerebral.
Right.
Do you believe that to be the case?
Yes, I do, and I think there's a market for it. I think the market for that is people between 15 and 25 who are more interested in seeing senseless, incredibly senseless acts of the head being chopped off with a sword, or someone getting impaled on an iron fence. Crazy things that could happen, getting a hand cut off.
Sensationalistic
violence appeals to a younger crowd, and it's kind of a campy thing. Let's look forward to watching the Texas Chainsaw Massacre again, where people are being dispatched with chainsaws.
Yeah.
And so there is an audience for those too. Some of them have become classics. Because of The Dawn of the Dead, Night of the Dead by George Romero, where you have a zombie attack and you've got to defend yourself against an army of zombies. So there's a campiness to it. They become cult favorites, and college kids love them in particular.
Yeah.
I talked to a lot of younger folks, and they really enjoy them. In fact, they would rather see those than something that would question their sanity or their psychological makeup. Perhaps it's more easy. It's perhaps easier to deal with that kind of event, which seems so bizarre and unrealistic, than something that's going to scare you like a ghost in your bed, or some kind of apparition in the basement that you have to go check out.
Right.
And sometimes it's going to be there, and sometimes it's not. So there's uncertainty in your mind with the psychological.
Right. The psychological films seem to make you uneasy around environments that you do run into every day. It's the ghost. It's haunting your house. It's not haunting the baseball stadium.
Right. It questions your security in your own domain.
Right.
That's right. How safe am I in my own bedroom? Do I have to keep looking under the bed? That's the other thing. Don't look under the bed, because that's where there are creepy crawly creatures. And don't climb up into your attic if you have one of those pull-down ladders.
And if you can avoid having an attic altogether, don't have a basement.
Have a one level. A townhouse.
Live in a studio apartment.
Yeah.
if at all possible.
So you can watch these and develop your own list of things not to do. It's probably a good code of behavior for your life, because you never know when you're going to encounter a zombie or a Frankenstein monster, or maybe even notice that your house guest does not have a reflection in the mirror, and he's sitting right next to you. So be careful of that.
Something else that I was curious about, coupled with the interest in movies and the lifelong love of them, and what you said about when you and Leslie go on cruise ships, that sometimes you will almost make up a persona.
Right.
Do you think that's related to the vicariousness that all the other lives that you can live by watching movies?
Yes. I think that's definitely the case. I'll get an idea from how someone else is acting in a certain profession, and so then maybe that appeals to me, and I've never had that profession in my own personal life. So on a cruise ship, we have 3,000 people. And 1,000 staff people, and they don't know me, so I could be Sir Alex, I could be Baron Rothschild, I could be anyone I want to be, and create a persona. Now, the thing is, you have to think on your feet, because I may be seated in a dinner party tomorrow night with a surgeon, and if I say I'm a surgeon, then I'm going to be on the hot seat, and I've got to come up with a quick explanation why I don't know where a certain gland is.
The risk of it being exposed.
Yeah,
right.
there's a risk, and that is some of the challenge. That's some of the excitement.
I was going to say that must be the thrill of it.
Yeah, that's
to a
the thrill of
degree.
it. That's the
Can
thrill.
you really get away with this?
That's right.
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
And I've been to some close calls, but in most cases, I'll just talk real fast, and or use the time for a restroom, and I'll get back to you in a little bit, and then find another place on the ship. Uh, but usually I can have enough of a knowledge of the kinds of careers that I can try to personify, or a career that I personally can handle. I won't say surgeon because I know that I'm asking for trouble. I
Right.
won't say attorney. I won't say judge.
There's so much technical.
Yeah, but I
jargon,
can, I
right.
can be safe with being a counselor and a teacher and an artist and maybe even a filmmaker.
Mm.
So I have to watch where I go. I don't go into organized sports because I may not know enough about those sports to be able to be convincing. It kind of annoys Leslie a little bit because she'll say, well, you're certainly going out of your way to create all this for yourself when you're plenty to deal with as you are. So
kind of playing roulette a little bit.
Yeah, it's playing roulette. That's it.
Do you where did you do you attribute the idea of doing that in a roundabout way, having seen so many movies in a way? I mean,
yeah, I see a tie-in with movies. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, because it occurred to me to ask you, but I hadn't assumed that was the case. But I thought that would be something to pose to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
If there's a connection there between is it the same? Is it the same thing that makes watching movies enjoyable? That inspires you to sort of play a role in that way?
Right, exactly.
Like almost like it's your turn to kind of participate in this make-believe.
Right, and I'm a frustrated ham actor, I guess. I've done things here and there, but not too much formally on stage, bits and pieces. And I like the idea of creating a role. And so, yes, the movies do give me impetus and ideas to work from. Also, people I meet outside of the enjoyment of film.
Right.
My everyday life brings me all kinds of interesting encounters. Even here in my local beach here, Aquatic Park, I'll find that no 2 days are similar at the beach, and the people that you meet differ vastly one day to another, and incredible encounters can happen.
Yeah.
And that's certainly the case of meeting yourself.
Certainly.
And some of our other friends.
Right.
Mutual friends. So that's the beauty of it. And I may learn from some of the new friends, for example, to incorporate some of their personality. If there's something that I particularly like, or sayings that friends have. So I may use those not only on the ship, but in everyday life.
It seems,
taking bits and pieces from people and creating a role, creating a persona.
Right, that's kind of collaging it together.
Yeah,
right.
And larger than life.
And that's something else about watching movies too, is that you see, I think narrative reality can feel more real and more stark, and just it's so defined. And there's a beginning and an end, and there are cuts to the scenes, and in movies you usually don't see people blowing their noses and going to the bathroom and doing their checkbook.
Right.
All the mundane maintenance is cut out, and it's always just the heart of the issue all the time.
Yeah.
And
even things like someone doesn't have dandruff on their lapel, or they don't have a sore that they picked or a pimple.
Right.
It was so sanitized.
Right.
And there's a special group of people that make sure you are impeccable when the camera's rolling. So there's that artificiality that develops. And when you go to real life, you see that people do have blemishes, and they do have scars. And, they're not completely clean in their attire. They've got stains in their clothing. And, so it often surprises me that we don't get a full reality when we're watching the movie.
Do you think that the reality in a narrative context, like in a movie or a play or a novel even, has to be a little bit Well, it has to have all that banality cut out so that the message of it is actually apparent.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
I think that why so many of us miss the message or we miss the boat on life is because those moments that are really important seem to get lost in this sea of unremarkable moments. And the idea
Okay.
of watching a movie or watching a play or even going to the opera or anything, any narrative portrayal of reality just isolates the things that are important so that you can recognize them
Right.
for what they are,
Right.
so that you almost have more clarity about it in the rest of your life, and you don't just miss it in this
Uh-huh.
ocean of nondescript banality.
Yeah. Minutia and trivia.
Right, right. Because it seems like it's so easy to miss it.
Sure. Sure. It
And,
is.
and that must be why there's such it's like every culture in the world tells stories about life. It
Uh-huh.
must not be enough to just go through it. You're going to miss so much of it.
Yeah.
And you get this distilled version of it
Right.
in the story.
Yes.
And so you can spot it when it's diluted
Uh-huh.
like it is during waking life.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think there's got to be something to it.
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah.
And we have to compress everything in an hour and a half, ideally, or 2 hours. So we have to show a change in someone's thinking in 15, 20 minutes to make the movie work
Right.
in the time frame given.
Right.
I'm thinking that a lot of filmmakers really were very adept at showing a passage of mental time. Bergman, in particular, if you watch some of his films.
Yeah.
Hitchcock is another, and some of the French directors, Truffaut
Yeah.
in particular, show this passage of mental time where someone comes to a conclusion after perhaps only having in film time only 15 minutes to grapple with the problem. And so we must see a transition of a person's thinking to, as you say, have it undiluted so that we walk away and learn perhaps from that experience of that
right.
character.
Right. Maybe this is the last question for now.
Sure.
But what connection do you see between, and is there one, and if so, what kind of a connection is it between, your own work as a visual artist
Yeah.
and your love of movies? I mean, do you find ideas from things that you've seen in the movies coming out in your artwork? Are there certain aesthetic ideas that come out? Because the artwork of yours that I've seen is really happy and joyous and
Yeah.
warm and vibrant. And I would never look at that artwork and think this is someone who loves horror movies.
Oh, good point.
You know what I mean?
Good point.
So,
Yeah.
but there's got to be this exchange of, media comes in, your own
Sure,
artwork
sure,
comes
sure.
out. I know for me, with the music and the poetry that I write, there are clear influences on my work.
Okay,
Right?
sure,
So,
sure.
but I'm curious about the stuff.
That's an excellent question. I never really have thought about it that way,
Mhm.
but I know there's a connection, and I may be hard pressed to put my finger on it, but I know I get ideas from horror movies. It could be often it's someone's personal home, their personalized room, what's in the room. I take that in too, especially how are the walls painted, what kind of art do they have. So sometimes
Oh, that's interesting.
when I'm working, I will reference back to a particular movie where the home was exquisite, a palatial, a mansion, and had individual artifacts that I treasure. So those are the same things I will later paint. But you're right, in a joyous, happy way. I will not show horror. Very seldom have I shown horror in my actual work, in my artwork.
Or even any kind of pathos, almost. I think of
Yeah.
it being almost singularly celebratory
Yes.
and
Yes.
really buoyant and exuberant. Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right, and I think perhaps that's one way of me processing what is sometimes horrific or sad, and trying to turn it into something more uplifting
Right.
for the public, for the world at large,
Yeah.
for myself.
Right. Well, because what I see is a more aspirational vision of the world
Yeah,
in what you're doing.
exactly.
And some people like to tell you how they think it really is, what life is really like,
Right.
and then some people want to tell you the life that we wish we were living, and show that to you. And I think I see more of that in more of the latter in your artwork.
Yes. That's
But then maybe what is happening with the appetite for horror films is the other side of that coin, which is the necessity to confront the most undesirable possible scenarios.
Right.
But then when you create of your own volition
Sure.
would be the most desirable presentation of life. Perhaps.
Processing all of it through my consciousness.
Yeah.
And my unconscious.
Mhm.
And see what's distilled. And that's the distillation.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a nice way to look at it. I never really gave it that direction or that thought. So I think you're right. So
It's a great place to stop for today. Once again, thank you so much for your
you.
time, and
Thank
it's
you.
been lovely. It's been lovely to talk to you about
wonderful.
it. Wonderful.
And I'm glad that. Let's see. How was that final lighting?
Oh, it's good. It's good,
It's
and
not really dark.
and there wasn't anybody peeing behind you.
No, nobody.